Welcome to What's Cooking with Wendy.
Hello, everyone. My name is Wendy Beckman, and I am a registered dietitian with the New York State Office for the Aging in SNAP-Ed, New York. Thanks for joining me today on What's Cooking with Wendy. Today, I'm going to be making a turkey breast with rosemary, sage, and thyme that has been roasted. Now, this is a great recipe for the holidays, especially if you want to have some turkey, but you don't want to cook a whole 20-pound bird. Now, this is going to be a great option for a smaller group of people, or you can make the recipe to use on the day of the holiday and then make leftovers the next day, like some turkey salad or something like that. We're going to post the link to the recipe in the chat box, and the recipe can also be found on the SNAP-Ed New York website at www.snapedny.org. Now, before we start cooking, we're going to look at the My Plate graphic. So this recipe falls into the protein section. And you want to remember that everything that you eat and drink over time matters. You want to find your healthy eating style and maintain it for a lifetime. The right mix can help you be healthier now and in the future. So in the purple section here, that's the protein section on My Plate. And you want to vary your protein routine by including more lean versions of protein such as chicken and turkey with the skin removed, fish and vegetable-based proteins like quinoa, beans, and rice, or any other legume and grain combined. Now, I've talked about complete and incomplete proteins before during our cooking demos, but I also discussed it during the Ask the Experts live event that occurred on October 15th, just last Friday. So if you missed any of those previous segments, make sure you check them out either here on Facebook, or you can check them out on the New York State Office for the Aging YouTube channel. We post all of our past Facebook live events on YouTube, and you're going to want to subscribe to the Office for the Aging YouTube channel so that you don't miss any new videos that are posted. So any of the Live with Greg's or the cooking demos or Ask the Experts Nutrition Edition, those are all on the YouTube channel, and there is a lot of great resources in those videos on YouTube, so make sure you check those out. So you might recall that getting enough protein in your diet is important as we age because we don't use protein as efficiently in our bodies as we get older. The typical American diet does tend to be a little higher in protein in general than some other diets in other parts of the world, but sometimes as we get older, we might not be getting enough protein all the time because we might not make full meals as often as we did when we were younger. I know now that my children are grown and they're not at home any longer, a lot of times they don't often feel like making a full meal, so I might just make a little snack for dinner instead of making a whole meal. And that's certainly okay, but you want to try to include protein in your snacks so that you make sure that you're getting enough. Our bodies need protein to make new cells, including muscle cells, red blood cells, and immune response cells. So individuals who are very protein deficient may end up with a weaker immune system because their bodies don't have enough protein to make the cells to fight off infection. So you want to make sure that you're getting enough protein every day. And I reviewed how to figure out how much protein you need every day in the Ask the Experts live stream that we did on October 15th. So you can check that out there. But now let's start making some turkey. You're going to remember to wash your hands with soap and water for at least 20 seconds before you start cooking, or use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer. And I think everybody has those on hand now because of the pandemic. So let's look at the ingredients for the recipe. The recipe calls for a turkey breast, and this is a great option if you don't want to make a whole turkey. Now, I've seen turkey breasts in my local grocery store in the past, but I wasn't able to find a turkey breast in my store when I was shopping recently. But I was able to find what's called a turkey tenderloin. So that's what I have right here. The turkey tenderloin is cut from the area between the two breasts of the turkey. The shape of the turkey tenderloin reminds me of a pork tenderloin, but it's a little bit larger. The turkey tenderloin can be cooked in the same way that a turkey breast would be. The recipe, as it's written, makes 8 servings, and it calls for a 3-pound turkey breast with the skin and bones still intact. So there is a little bit of waste there. And with the turkey tenderloin, there's no skin or no bones, so you might actually be getting a better deal than if you purchase the turkey breast, since there's no waste with the bones and skin. You do want to check your unit prices and make sure that you're getting the most bang for your buck wherever that's concerned. This package of tenderloin that I bought weighed 1.7 pounds, which is just a little more than half of what the recipe called for. And the tenderloin came in 2 pieces. So this piece is about a quarter of what the recipe calls for. But I just cut the recipe ingredients in half, and that's what I'm going to show you today. So instead of, enough ingredients for the oil and the seasonings for a 3-pound turkey breast, I'm just going to show you what it would be for about 1.5 pounds. And this is actually a little less than that. But let's look at those ingredients. The recipe calls for an onion quartered and a carrot quartered. They just go in the pan with the turkey. So I didn't cut these in half. I just ended up using a carrot and 1 onion because these ingredients don't affect the recipe too much. I just used the whole vegetable. This is another way to add more vegetables to your plate and make half your plate fruits and vegetables. I always recommend increasing the vegetable portion of a meal whenever you have the chance, because it's just another way to get more vegetables and add more color to your plate. I have half of a tablespoon of fresh thyme, which is right here, and a half of a tablespoon of fresh rosemary, because I was able to find those in my grocery store, but you can use dried if that's what you have. Now, generally, if you're using a fresh herb instead of a dried one, 1 tablespoon of the fresh herb will equal about 1 teaspoon of the dried. Now, I did have some fresh thyme, but I ended up using the dried, which is this right here, because if you see here, the leaves on the thyme are very, very small. And you have to remove them for this recipe from the stem. And as you can see, they're really sort of tiny. It tells you, if you have a recipe that tells you to use a sprig of thyme, the whole thing, if that's the case, you can put the whole thing in the recipe and then remove it after the food has been cooked. But you can see here that the leaves are really kind of very small, and they're kind of a pain in the neck to remove from the stem of the plant for this recipe. So I would recommend using the dried thyme, because honestly, removing the little tiny, tiny leaves from the stem is kind of more trouble than it's worth. In the future, I'm only going to use fresh thyme if the recipe calls for the whole sprig with the leaves and the stem all together, and you throw it in there. But it does look sort of pretty. It actually almost looks a little bit like a pine needles on a branch there. So you also need a half of a tablespoon, or excuse me, a tablespoon and a half of olive oil. The recipe calls for 3 tablespoons of olive oil, and I cut that in half, so a tablespoon and a half. Salt and pepper to taste is optional. And you can omit the salt, especially if you're trying to avoid added salt due to high blood pressure. If you remember from some of the cooking demos I've done in the past, I've talked about how salt can actually make high blood pressure worse, even if you're on a medication. So I didn't use any salt. Remember that salt is one of the things that we want to limit to or avoid, because most Americans get plenty of salt in their diet. Now, you can also use chicken broth or margarine for basting. That's called for in the recipe, and that is also optional. To cook the turkey, you place the turkey in a roasting pan with the onion and the carrot. I didn't do that here because it's a small pan. And next you mix the olive oil with the spices. So we're going to do that. We're going to put the olive oil in there. We're going to put the rosemary. We're going to put the thyme and the sage. So that's the thyme, that's powdered. And I'm just going to mix those up and make a little paste out of them. So after that is completed, and this is a little bit messy, but you're going to take that mixture and you're going to rub it right into the turkey. Now you can do this with your hands. I did it with the one that I cooked earlier, and I made sure that the oil and the spices were on the bottom, on the top, all the way around. I'm not going to do that here because that is a messy kind of a thing to do, and I don't have a sink where I can wash my hands. After that step, you definitely want to wash your hands because you have been touching the raw turkey. First, your hands are also going to be all oily, but after you touch the raw turkey, it's a good practice to wash your hands for 20 seconds with soap and water after you do that, to sort of cut down on your chance of any foodborne illness, including things like salmonella. Now, once you have that done, you put the turkey in the roasting pan. Again, you can add the carrots and the onions to it, and you're going to put it in the oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 minutes. This kind of browns it really nicely. You then baste the turkey if you want to with either the chicken broth or the margarine or the pan drippings. I use the pan drippings. I had plenty of pan drippings in the pan and I just poured them right over the top of the turkey. If you use margarine, opt for tub margarine as it usually has unsaturated fats in it as opposed to saturated fats that are found in butter and stick margarine. And unsaturated fats are better for our heart health. Saturated fats can lead to increased cholesterol, which is not good for our heart health. So after 15 minutes of the turkey being in the oven at 400 degrees, you'll then reduce the heat of the oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit and roast the turkey for about an hour and 15 minutes. Now it's certainly going to take that long, especially if the skin and the bone are in the turkey. You're going to want to cook it for that long. With this turkey tenderloin, I didn't have to cook it quite as long. Now, while it's cooking for that extended period of time on 350 degrees, you're going to want to baste it every 20 minutes if you want to. I actually didn't do that. I only basted it once in the beginning and once at the end, and it turned out fine. But you can do that if you want to, especially if you're working with a larger piece of meat. You want to maybe baste it a little bit more than I did. So, like I said, I didn't have to cook mine as long. The best way to check if the turkey is fully cooked is to insert a thermometer into the middle of the turkey and then make sure that it has come up to an internal temperature of 165 degrees. I have this little thermometer here that I've had for several years. This one is just an analog as opposed to a digital thermometer. And they're not terribly expensive. And I like the extra knowledge of knowing how hot it is inside my meat, whether it's chicken or turkey or beef, it doesn't matter. And you can look up what the cooking temperatures are for different cuts of meat. And it's just extra insurance. And I like that because I'm not always a very confident cooker. If you want a confident chef, sometimes I need a little extra reinforcement there with that. So another way to check for doneness is to see if the juices of the meat are running clear, and you actually can cut into the middle of the turkey after it's been cooking to make sure that it's no longer pink inside. And I've done that in the past too, but that is not as exact of a science as if you use your thermometer. So once your turkey has reached the correct temperature internally of 165 degrees, you can remove the turkey and put it on the carving board and let it rest for 10 minutes before you carve it. That will actually help the juices sort of settle into the turkey, and the turkey will actually continue to cook a little bit for that 10 minutes while it's sitting on the carving board. But it's always a good idea to, any piece of meat that you're cooking, it's a good idea to let it rest before you carve it. It actually will end up with sort of a more moist feeling type of meat because it lets the juices go right throughout the meat before you carve into it. So I prepped the spices last night for the turkey, but then I cooked it this morning. I did use the thermometer to check the internal temperature. And because it was a smaller piece of meat, it only took about 30 minutes to cook completely. So that's one of the advantages of using the tenderloin instead of the breast with the bone and the skin on. Now, I think it's a great recipe for the holidays or anytime that you want to make something different for dinner. Sometimes I get tired of chicken. I like to include lean protein choices in my diet, including things like fish, chicken, and turkey. And I don't want to usually make a whole turkey. That's just not a time conservative thing to do, right? It can take hours and hours to do that. So this is the one that I made previously. I want to have you take a look at that. It really smells wonderful. The thyme and the sage and the rosemary lend a beautiful smell to it. It's one of the nice things of using the fresh ones, the fresh herbs here that I have, is that they smell really wonderful. One of the issues is though, they can be more expensive. So if you have dried, it's perfectly okay to use those. And they're less expensive and they keep longer. So I often will suggest those. But this is that's the turkey when it's done, and it really smells amazing. And one of the things I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut into this a little bit here. And we will see. So you can see that there, that's the turkey tenderloin. And that looks, oh gosh, that smells so good. I'm definitely going to eat some of this for my lunch. So that's what it looks like when it's completed. It's just absolutely delicious. It's a really nice lean form of protein. And I'm going to show you that a little bit closer. And these are the fresh herbs next to it. It smells amazing. So I'm definitely going to have some of that for my lunch. So I hope that this recipe gave you some more ideas on how you can vary your protein routine by including more lean protein choices into your diet. Now, the holiday season is gearing up, believe it or not. I'm not quite ready for it, but here it is. In November, I'm going to be making a Northwest apple salad, which I think is going to be a great side dish for a holiday meal. You can make it really colorful with red and green in it, sort of appropriate for many of the holidays that happen during this season. So I'm going to be back with another edition of What's Cooking with Wendy on Friday, November 17th at 11:30 a.m. right here on the New York State Office for the Aging Facebook page, where you can find out more ways where you can save time, save money, and eat healthy. This presentation was funded by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. This institution is an equal opportunity provider. Have a great day, everyone, and stay safe out there.